The rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the oncology wing at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, each droplet racing down the glass like tears against the Los Angeles skyline. Inside the sterile examination room, Marcus Whitfield sat, motionless in the leather chair, his usually commanding presence diminished by the weight of 3 words that had just shattered his world. 6 months left. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dr. Sarah Chen closed the manila folder containing his test. Results. Her expression carefully neutral, despite the gravity of what she'd just delivered. The pancreatic cancer had spread faster than anyone anticipated, aggressive and unforgiving, much like Marcus himself had been in the business world that had made him billions. Now, at 52, the pharmaceutical empire he'd built from nothing seemed as fragile as his own mortality. The irony wasn't lost on him. Marcus Whitfield, whose company had developed life-saving treatments for countless patients, couldn't save himself. The very medications his laboratories produced were powerless against the disease ravaging his body. Money, influence, connections. To the world's best medical minds, none of it mattered when death had marked its calendar. Marcus walked through the hospital corridors in a daze, past families huddled together in waiting rooms, past children with brave smiles and worried parents. The bustle of life around him felt surreal, as if he were watching a movie of someone else's existence. His phone buzzed incessantly with calls from his board of directors, investors, and business associates, but he ignored them all. What was the point of quarterly projections when you wouldn't live to see the next quarter? The drive back to his Malibu estate felt endless. The Pacific Coast Highway stretched before him, a ribbon of asphalt between the churning ocean and the golden hills of California. His Bentley moved silently through the traffic, but Marcus heard nothing except the echo of Dr. Chen's voice explaining treatment options that would buy him time, but couldn't buy him a future. Chemotherapy might extend his life to 8 months, maybe 10 if he was lucky. Radiation could ease the pain, but wouldn't stop the inevitable. Marcus had always been a man who solved problems. When his first pharmaceutical startup had nearly collapsed due to a patent dispute, he'd found a way around it. When a rival company had tried to acquire his business through hostile takeover, he'd outmaneuvered them with strategic partnerships that doubled his valuation overnight. But cancer wasn't a business problem that could be negotiated or outsmarted. It was a sentence, and he was running out of appeals. His estate sat on 12 acres overlooking the Pacific, a monument to his success with its infinity pool, tennis court, and guest houses that had entertained Hollywood stars and political figures. Tonight, the sprawling mansion felt like a mausoleum, each room echoing with emptiness. Marcus had never married, had no children, no family to speak of except a distant cousin in Oregon whom he hadn't spoken to in years. His entire focus had been building Whitfield Pharmaceuticals, and now that empire would outlive him while he died alone. He poured himself a glass of 30-year-old scotch and stood on his terrace, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. The alcohol burned his throat, but the pain was welcome. Something tangible he could control. Tomorrow he would have to tell his board, his employees, the shareholders who trusted him with their investments. Tonight, he wanted to pretend that time wasn't running out like sand through an hourglass. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Marcus lay in his king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with thoughts of legacy and regret. What had he accomplished, really? He'd made money, yes. He'd built a company that employed thousands and developed treatments that helped people. But what personal mark would he leave on the world? Who would remember Marcus Whitfield the man, not the businessman? The next morning brought a steady stream of meetings that felt like elaborate performances. Marcus sat in his corner office on the 40th floor of the Whitfield Pharmaceuticals building in downtown Los Angeles, nodding at financial reports and strategic presentations while his mind wandered. His assistant, Elena Rodriguez, who had worked for him for 15 years, seemed to sense something was wrong. She brought him coffee without being asked, rescheduled non-essential meetings, and handled calls with an efficiency that had made her invaluable. It was during the third meeting of the day, a presentation about expanding into European markets, that Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He wasn't listening to the PowerPoint slides about regulatory approvals and distribution networks. Instead, he was thinking about a news story he'd seen the previous week about overcrowded orphanages and the thousands of children in the foster care system. The thought struck him with unexpected force. He could use his remaining time to make a difference in a young life, maybe several young lives. That afternoon, Marcus found himself doing something he'd never done before, researching adoption agencies and foster care programs in Los Angeles County. He learned about the overwhelming number of children waiting for permanent homes, the siblings, who were often separated because families preferred to adopt individual children rather than take on multiple kids at once. The statistics were staggering and heartbreaking. By the end of the week, Marcus had contacted 3 different agencies and scheduled appointments to discuss his interest in adoption. The social workers were surprised by his request, particularly when he expressed interest in adopting siblings who had been difficult to place. Most potential parents wanted babies or young children, not school-age kids who came with trauma and behavioral challenges. The first agency, Bright Futures Adoption Services, occupied a modest building in Santa Monica. Marcus felt overdressed in his tailored suit as he sat across from Linda Patterson, a veteran social worker whose office walls were covered with photos of successful adoptions and thank you cards from grateful families. She reviewed his application with professional thoroughness, noting his financial stability and the background check that showed no criminal history. "Mr. Whitfield," Linda said, adjusting her glasses as she looked up from his file, "your application is certainly impressive from a financial standpoint. You can clearly provide for any child or children placed in your care, but I have to ask about your motivation. You're a successful businessman with a demanding career. Are you prepared for the challenges of raising children, particularly those who may have experienced trauma?" Marcus had prepared for this question, though he couldn't tell her the complete truth about his terminal diagnosis. That would likely disqualify him immediately. Instead, he focused on what felt genuine. "I've spent my entire career building a company, accumulating wealth and success. But I've realized that none of that matters if I don't use it to make a real difference in someone's life. I have the resources to provide opportunities for children who might not otherwise have them." Linda studied him carefully. "Adoption isn't charity, Mr. Whitfield. These children need love, stability, and emotional connection, not just financial support. They need a parent who will be present for school plays and soccer games and teenage heartbreak. Are you prepared to restructure your entire life around their needs?" The question hit deeper than Linda probably intended. Marcus was restructuring his entire life, though not by choice. The truth was, he had 6 months to give these children stability and love, to set up a future for them, even if he wouldn't be part of it. He would need to arrange guardianship, trust funds, and educational support that would last long after he was gone. But he couldn't explain any of that without raising red flags. "I understand that children need more than money," Marcus replied. "Carefully, I'm prepared to make them my priority. My company has excellent management in place, and I can step back from day-to-day operations to focus on being a father." Linda seemed satisfied with his answer, though he could see the questions lingering in her eyes. She handed him a folder filled with profiles of children awaiting adoption. I'd like you to review these and think about what age group and situation might work best for your family structure. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. We have several sibling groups that have been waiting for placement for months or even years. That night, Marcus sat in his home office surrounded by the profiles Linda had given him. Each folder contained photographs and basic information about children who had been failed by the system in various ways. Some had been removed from abusive homes, others had lost parents to addiction or violence. All of them carried invisible wounds that would require patience and understanding to heal. It was near midnight when he found them, the Rodriguez siblings. 5 children aged 6 to 14 who had been in the system for 2 years after their parents died in a car accident. The file explained that they had been placed in different foster homes initially because no family could take all 5 together. Only recently had they been reunited in a group home, but finding an adoptive family willing to take on 5 children had proven nearly impossible. Marcus studied their photographs. Maria, the oldest at 14, had dark eyes that seemed too serious for her age. The twins, Carlos and Carmen, were 12 and had the same stubborn set to their chins. 10-year-old Sofia smiled shyly at the camera, while 6-year-old Diego grinned with missing front teeth. They looked like children who had learned to be strong too early, who had survived loss that would have broken many adults. The next morning, Marcus called Linda Patterson before his first meeting. "I'd like to meet the Rodriguez siblings," he said without preamble. Linda paused on the other end of the line. "Mr. Whitfield, 5 children is a significant commitment. Perhaps you should start by meeting with some of the smaller sibling groups, maybe 2 or 3 children." "No," Marcus said firmly. "The Rodriguez family. When can I meet them?" The meeting was arranged for the following Saturday at the Pine Grove Children's Home, a facility that tried to maintain some warmth despite its institutional nature. Marcus arrived early, sitting in his car for several minutes as he watched. Children play in the fenced yard behind the building. Some laughed and ran around playground equipment, while others sat alone, lost in their own thoughts. Margaret Sullivan, the home's director, met him at the front entrance. She was a woman in her 60s, with graying hair and kind eyes that had seen too much sadness over her 40-year career in child services. "The Rodriguez children are special," she told Marcus as they walked down a hallway lined with children's artwork. "They've been through tremendous loss, but they've stayed close to each other. Maria has been like a second mother to the younger ones, especially Diego." They entered a common room where the 5 siblings sat together on a worn couch, their body language defensive and guarded. They had clearly been told that a potential adoptive father was coming to meet them, and their expressions ranged from cautious hope to outright suspicion. Marcus felt a pang of recognition in their eyes. He had worn similar expressions during his own difficult childhood in foster care, though he had never told anyone about those early years. "Children," Margaret said gently, "this is Mr. Whitfield. He's interested in learning more about your family." Maria, the eldest, stood up first, her protective instincts clearly engaged. "Are you going to separate us?" she asked directly, her voice steady despite her young age. The question caught Marcus off guard with its intensity. "No," he replied, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "If I adopt anyone, it would be all of you together. Families shouldn't be broken apart." Something shifted in the children's posture at his words. Carlos and Carmen exchanged glances. Sofia stopped fidgeting with her hands, and Diego scooted closer to Maria on the couch. They had heard promises before from adults who didn't keep them, but something in Marcus's tone seemed to resonate. "Do you have other kids?" Carmen asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No," Marcus answered honestly. I don't have any children. I've spent most of my life working, building a business, but I've realized that work isn't enough anymore. I want to share what I have with a family. Diego, the youngest, looked up at him with curious 6-year-old eyes. Are you rich? Mrs. Sullivan said you have a big house. Diego, Maria scolded gently, but Marcus smiled. I do have a big house, he confirmed. Big enough for all of you to have your own rooms if you wanted. There's a pool and a yard where you could play. But more importantly, I want to make sure you all stay together and have everything you need to grow up happy and healthy. For the next hour, Marcus sat with the children in their common room, learning about their personalities and their dreams. Maria wanted to be a doctor, inspired by the EMTs who had tried to save their parents. Carlos loved soccer and talked animatedly about his favorite teams. Carmen was fascinated by computers and had taught herself basic programming using the home's old desktop. Sophia was artistic, showing Marcus drawings she had made of butterflies and flowers. Diego just wanted to make sure his big sister Maria would always be with him. As the visit ended, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with profit margins or market share. These 5 children needed stability, love, and opportunity. He had 6 months to give them, the foundation for a future, even if he wouldn't be there to see them grow up. Walking back to his car, Marcus was already planning. He would need to hire a nanny, someone who could help with the transition and eventually take over their care when his illness progressed. He would need to establish trust funds for each child's education and future needs. Most importantly, he would need to make every day count, to give them enough love and security in his remaining time to last them a lifetime. The adoption process moved surprisingly quickly once Marcus made his intentions clear. His financial resources allowed him to hire the best family lawyers and expedite background checks that typically took months. Within 6 weeks, the Rodriguez siblings were moving into his Malibu estate, their few possessions dwarfed by the mansion's grandeur. The first few days were an adjustment period filled with wonder and uncertainty. The children explored their new home with cautious excitement, touching furniture and fixtures as if they might disappear at any moment. Marcus had hired Elena Rodriguez, his assistant's cousin, as a live-in nanny and housekeeper. Elena spoke Spanish with the children, which provided comfort during the transition, and her maternal instincts helped bridge the gap between Marcus's business-minded approach and the emotional needs of traumatized children. Marcus threw himself into fatherhood with the same intensity he had once applied to building his pharmaceutical empire. He researched child psychology, read parenting books, and consulted with therapists who specialized in helping children cope with loss and adjustment. He enrolled them in excellent schools, signed them up for activities that matched their interests, and made sure they had access to counseling to help process their grief. But it was the small moments that surprised him most. Teaching Diego to ride a bike in the circular driveway, helping Carmen set up a computer programming environment in her room, watching Sophia paint murals on her bedroom walls, attending Carlos's soccer games and cheering from the sidelines, listening to Maria's dreams of medical school and promising her that money would never be an obstacle to her education. The children began to relax into their new life, but they remained watchful, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. They had learned not to trust that good things would last. Marcus understood their wariness. He felt it himself, knowing that his time with them was limited in ways they couldn't imagine. 3 months into their new living arrangement, Marcus noticed that Diego had been feeling unwell. The 6-year-old complained of headaches and seemed more tired than usual. When the symptoms persisted, Marcus took him to Dr. Jennifer Kim, the pediatrician he had found for all the children. Dr. Kim was thorough and kind, but her examination of Diego raised more questions than answers. "I'd like to run some blood and tests," Dr. Kim told Marcus after Diego had been taken to the waiting room by Elena. "His symptoms could be nothing more than adjustment stress, but I want to rule out any underlying conditions. Since we don't have complete medical histories, for the children, it's important to establish baseline health profiles." Marcus agreed immediately. "Test all of them," he said. "I want to make sure they're all healthy and up to date on everything they need." Dr. Kim nodded approvingly. "That's very responsible. I'll order comprehensive panels for all 5 children. We'll check for everything from basic vitamin levels to genetic markers that might indicate predispositions to certain conditions." The blood draws were scheduled for the following week. Marcus made it an adventure, taking all 5 children out for ice cream afterward and assuring Diego that the tests were just to make sure everyone was healthy and strong. The children seemed to accept this explanation, though Maria watched Marcus carefully, her mature instincts picking up on adult undercurrents she couldn't quite identify. While they waited for the results, life continued its new rhythm. Marcus had stepped back from most of his business responsibilities, telling his board that he was taking an extended sabbatical to focus on personal matters. His assistant Elena Rodriguez handled his affairs with remarkable efficiency, fielding calls and managing crises while he attended parent-teacher conferences and helped with homework. The symptoms that had been manageable for months were becoming harder to hide. Marcus found himself taking more frequent breaks, experiencing pain that required careful management, and feeling fatigue that no amount of rest could cure. He had started chemotherapy treatments, though he told the children and Elena that he was simply going to doctor's appointments for routine checkups. The treatments bought him time, but at the cost of energy and stamina he desperately needed for his new role as a father. It was on a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 4 months after the adoption was finalized, that Dr. Kim called with the blood test results. Marcus was in his home office, helping Carmen with a programming project when his phone rang. He stepped into the hallway to take the call privately. "Mr. Whitfield," Dr. Kim's voice carried an unusual tension. "I need you to come in immediately. There's something about the children's blood work that we need to discuss in person." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Is someone sick? Is Diego okay?" "Diego is fine," Dr. Kim replied quickly, "but there are some results that are unusual. I'd prefer to explain in person. Can you come in this afternoon?" An hour later, Marcus sat across from Dr. Kim in her office, his hands clenched in his lap as she spread the lab reports across her desk. The medical terminology meant little to him, but her expression spoke volumes. "Mr. Whitfield," she began carefully, "the children's blood work shows some remarkable results. All 5 siblings have extremely rare genetic markers that I've only seen a few times in my career. Specifically, they carry genetic sequences that make them virtually immune to certain types of cancer." Marcus felt the world tilt on its axis. "What does that mean exactly?" Dr. Kim leaned forward, her scientific excitement barely contained, despite her professional demeanor. "Their blood contains natural antibodies and genetic variations that could be revolutionary for cancer research. The proteins their bodies produce might hold the key to developing new treatments or even vaccines for pancreatic cancer, among others." The irony hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had adopted these children to give them a future with his remaining time, only to discover that they might hold the key to a future he would never see. The very disease that was killing him could potentially be cured using their blood. "There's more," Dr. Kim continued. "These genetic markers are incredibly rare and typically only found in isolated populations with very specific ancestry. The fact that all 5 siblings carry them suggests a unique family lineage. Mr. Whitfield, these children's blood could be worth millions to pharmaceutical companies for research purposes. Marcus thought immediately of his own company, of the laboratories and research facilities that could analyze the children's blood and potentially develop treatments that could save thousands of lives. But he also thought of the children themselves, playing in his pool and doing homework at his kitchen table, finally feeling safe and loved after years of uncertainty. What would research involve? He asked quietly. Regular blood draws, genetic mapping, possibly tissue samples. Nothing harmful, but it would mean a lifetime of medical monitoring and involvement. These children would become subjects of scientific study, their privacy compromised for the greater good of medical advancement. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of an impossible decision. The rational part of his brain, the businessman who had built an empire, recognized the incredible opportunity. The father, who had fallen in love with 5 extraordinary children, wanted to protect them from becoming laboratory specimens. "Doctor," he said finally, "I need you to seal these results. Don't share them with anyone. Don't enter them into any database, and don't mention this to another soul until I decide how to proceed." Dr. Kim looked surprised. "Mr. Whitfield, this is a significant medical discovery. The implications for cancer research are enormous." "I understand," Marcus replied firmly. "But these are my children, not research subjects. I need time to consider what's best for them, not what's best for science." As he drove home along the Pacific Coast Highway, Marcus's mind raced with possibilities and consequences. He could contact his own research team, set up protocols that would protect the children while advancing cancer research. He could sell the information to the highest bidder and ensure the children's financial future was secured beyond anything he had already arranged. Or he could bury the results and let his children live normal lives, free from the burden of carrying miraculous blood that could save others, but might cost them their privacy and childhood. The sun was setting over the Pacific as Marcus pulled into his driveway, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his home, he could see his children gathered around the kitchen island where Eleanor was helping them with dinner preparations. Maria was chopping vegetables with careful precision. The twins were arguing about homework, Sophia was drawing at the counter, and Diego was standing on a step stool to reach the sink. They looked like any normal family preparing for an evening, a meal, but Marcus now knew they were anything but normal. They carried within their blood the potential to change medical history, to save countless lives, possibly even to cure the disease that was slowly killing their adoptive father. The question that would haunt his remaining months was whether that potential was worth the cost of their innocence and freedom. As he sat in his car, watching them through the window, Marcus made a decision that would test every value he had ever held. The business world had taught him that every resource should be maximized, every advantage should be exploited. But fatherhood was teaching him that some things were more precious than profit, and some discoveries were too dangerous to reveal. The children's laughter drifted out from the house, carried on the evening breeze from the Pacific. Soon, he would have to go inside, help with homework, read bedtime stories, and pretend that their world hadn't just changed forever. He would have to look into their trusting eyes and decide whether to protect their secret or use it to potentially save millions of lives. Time was running out for Marcus Whitfield, but for his children, time had suddenly become both a gift and a burden he wasn't sure they should have to carry. The blood test results that could change everything lay locked in Dr. Kim's office, waiting for a decision that would define not just their future, but the future of everyone their remarkable blood might one day save. The weight of that choice pressed down on Marcus as he finally stepped out of his car and walked toward the warm lights of home, where 5 extraordinary children waited for their father to join them for dinner, unaware that they carried miracles in their veins. The morning after receiving Dr. Kim's earth-shattering news, Marcus found himself standing in his kitchen at dawn, watching the sunrise paint the Pacific in shades of gold and crimson. The house was still quiet, his 5 children sleeping peacefully, in their beds, unaware that their adoptive father had spent the entire night pacing his office and wrestling with a decision that could alter the course of medical history. Coffee steamed in his mug as Marcus reviewed the encrypted files Dr. Kim had sent to his personal email. The genetic markers were unlike anything he had seen in his decades in the pharmaceutical industry. The children's blood contained naturally occurring proteins that seemed to actively seek out and destroy cancerous cells before they could establish themselves. It wasn't just immunity. It was as if their bodies had evolved a sophisticated defense system that could potentially be replicated and mass-produced. Elena arrived early, as she always did, finding Marcus already dressed and sitting at the kitchen island with medical journals spread around him. She had worked for the Whitfield family long enough to recognize when her employer was grappling with something significant, though she had no idea of the magnitude of his current dilemma. "The children will be awake soon," she said softly, beginning her morning routine of preparing breakfast and organizing school supplies. "Diego has been asking when he gets his test results back. He's worried the doctor found something wrong." Marcus looked up from the genetic analysis reports, feeling the weight of Elena's innocent comment. Diego's concern about his health results seemed almost laughable given what those results actually revealed, but the 6-year-old's worry reminded Marcus that these were children first, medical miracles second. "The results are fine," Marcus said carefully. "Better than fine, actually. All the children are perfectly healthy." Elena smiled with relief as she began preparing Diego's favorite breakfast of scrambled eggs with cheese. The normalcy of her actions felt surreal to Marcus, who was sitting 3 feet away, contemplating whether to turn his adopted children into the most valuable research subjects in medical history. As the children began stirring upstairs, Marcus made his first decision of what would become the most difficult day of his life. He called his personal attorney, David Chen, and arranged an emergency meeting for that morning. If he was going to explore the implications of the blood test results, he needed legal protection for the children that went far beyond standard adoption agreements. The Rodriguez siblings descended the stairs in their usual morning chaos. Maria, ever the responsible eldest, herded the younger ones toward the kitchen while simultaneously braiding Sophia's hair and reminding the twins about their soccer practice after school. Diego bounced down the stairs on his bottom, a habit that Elena had been trying to break with limited success. "Daddy Marcus," Diego announced as he climbed onto the bar stool next to his adoptive father. "My arm doesn't hurt anymore from the blood test. See?" He held up his small arm, proudly displaying the tiny band-aid that covered the needle site. The word "daddy" still caught Marcus off guard every time one of the children used it. They had started calling him that naturally about 2 months. After moving in, and each time it happened, something warm and painful twisted in his chest. Now, knowing what he knew about their blood, the innocent trust in Diego's voice felt both precious and terrifying. "That's wonderful, buddy," Marcus managed, ruffling Diego's dark hair. "Dr. Kim said everyone is very healthy and strong." Germaine looked up from her tablet, where she was reviewing code she had written the night before. At 12, she had already surpassed many adult programmers in her understanding of complex algorithms. "When do we get to see the actual results? I want to understand what they tested for and what the numbers mean." Marcus felt his throat tighten. Carmen's analytical mind would eventually want to research her own genetic markers if she knew they existed. Her curiosity and intelligence, qualities he admired and encouraged, could become dangerous if she learned about her unique blood composition. "The tests were just routine checks to make sure everyone is healthy," he replied, hoping his voice sounded casual. Nothing exciting enough to warrant detailed analysis. Maria, who had been quietly observing the conversation while helping Sophia with her breakfast, gave Marcus a look that suggested she sensed something beneath his words. At 14, she had developed an instinct for adult deception that came from years of navigating the foster care system. She didn't challenge him directly, but Marcus could feel her watching him more carefully than usual. After the children left for school, Marcus drove to downtown Los Angeles for his meeting with David Chen. The law offices of Chen, Martinez and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming skyscraper with conference rooms that offered panoramic views of the city. David had been Marcus's attorney for over a decade, handling everything from corporate acquisitions to patent disputes. Today's request would be unlike anything they had previously discussed. David Chen was a methodical man in his 50s who had built his reputation on protecting his clients' interests with quiet efficiency. He listened without interruption as Marcus explained the situation, occasionally making notes, but revealing nothing of his thoughts until the full story had been told. "Let me make sure I understand," David said finally, removing his glasses and cleaning them with deliberate precision. "Your 5 adopted children have blood that contains naturally occurring cancer-fighting properties. These properties could potentially be worth hundreds of millions, if not billions, to pharmaceutical companies for research and development. And you want to explore your options while ensuring the children's rights and privacy are protected." Marcus nodded, appreciating David's ability to distill complex situations into clear terms. "The question is whether I have any legal obligation to share this information and what protections I can put in place if I choose to move forward." David was quiet for several minutes, clearly weighing the legal and ethical implications. "Legally, you have no obligation to share medical information about your children unless it poses a public health risk, which this clearly doesn't. As their adoptive father, you have the right to make medical decisions on their behalf, including whether to participate in research studies." "But," Marcus prompted, sensing there was more. "But," David continued, "if this genetic trait is as significant as you're suggesting, there are ethical considerations that go beyond legal requirements. The potential to save lives is enormous, and some would argue that withholding this information is morally equivalent to letting people die from preventable causes." Marcus had been wrestling with exactly that dilemma since leaving Dr. Kim's office. His own cancer was progressing, despite the chemotherapy treatments he had been receiving in secret. Every day, people died from the same disease that was slowly killing him. If his children's blood could prevent even some of those deaths, did he have the right to protect their privacy at the cost of other lives? "What kind of protections could we establish?" Marcus asked. David opened his laptop and began typing notes. "We could create an irrevocable trust that would control any commercial applications of their genetic material. The children would be the sole beneficiaries, and they would gain control of the trust when they reach adulthood. We could establish strict protocols for any research participation, limiting the frequency and invasiveness of testing. Most importantly, we could maintain their anonymity and ensure they can withdraw consent at any time. And if I choose not to pursue this at all, then you say nothing. Destroy the test results and let your children live normal lives." "But Marcus," David's tone became more serious, "you need to consider what happens when you're no longer here to protect them. If this genetic trait is hereditary, their own children might carry it. Someone else might discover what you've chosen to hide." The meeting lasted 3 hours, during which David outlined various scenarios and their legal implications. By the time Marcus left the law office, he had authorized the creation of preliminary trust documents and confidentiality agreements, though he still hadn't decided whether he would ever use them. That afternoon, Marcus found himself in the sterile corridors of Whitfield Pharmaceuticals for the first time in months. His company's research division occupied 4 floors of the building, housing some of the most advanced genetic research laboratories on the West Coast. Dr. Angela Morrison, his head of research, greeted him with surprise and concern. "Marcus, you look tired," she said, studying his face with the analytical eye of a scientist who had known him for over a decade. "Elena said you were taking time off for personal reasons, but I didn't expect to see you back so soon." Dr. Morrison was one of the few people Marcus trusted completely. She had been instrumental in developing several of Whitfield Pharmaceuticals' most successful treatments, and her integrity was beyond question. If he was going to explore the implications of his children's genetic gift, he needed someone with her expertise and ethics to guide the process. "Angela, I need to discuss a hypothetical research scenario with you," Marcus said as they walked toward her private office. "Something that requires absolute confidentiality." Her office was filled with scientific journals, research awards, and photographs from various medical conferences around the world. Angela poured 2 cups of tea from an electric kettle she kept on her desk, a habit she had developed during her graduate studies at Oxford. "I'm listening," she said, settling into her chair with the focused attention she brought to all scientific discussions. Marcus had prepared a carefully worded explanation that avoided identifying the children while conveying the essential details. He described a theoretical family with rare genetic markers that provided natural immunity to certain cancers, particularly pancreatic cancer. He outlined the potential applications for research and drug development while emphasizing the need to protect the subject's privacy and well-being. Angela listened intently, occasionally asking technical questions about the genetic sequences and protein structures Marcus described. As a researcher, her excitement was obvious, but her experience working with human subjects had taught her to consider the broader implications of medical research. "If this genetic immunity is real," she said finally, "we're talking about a paradigm shift in cancer treatment. The applications could extend far beyond pancreatic cancer to virtually any form of the disease. But the research process would require years of study, and the subjects would need to be monitored continuously. What would that monitoring involve? Regular blood draws, genetic mapping, possibly bone marrow samples. We would need to study how their immune systems develop over time, whether the immunity remains consistent, and how their genetics might be modified or replicated. It would mean a lifetime of medical involvement." Marcus felt his stomach clench as he imagined Diego, now 6 years old, growing up with needles and medical appointments as a constant part of his life. The boy who bounced downstairs and asked for extra bedtime stories would become a perpetual research subject, valuable for his blood rather than loved for his personality. Could the research be done without disrupting their normal lives? Marcus asked. Angela considered this carefully. We could minimize the invasiveness, perhaps limit testing to quarterly checkups and annual comprehensive studies. But Marcus, if these genetic markers are as significant as you're suggesting, every pharmaceutical company in the world would want access to these subjects. Once this information becomes public, protecting their privacy would become nearly impossible. That evening, Marcus sat in his home office, staring at a financial analysis he had requested from his company's business development team. The hypothetical value of exclusive access to revolutionary cancer-fighting genetic material was staggering. Conservative estimates suggested licensing deals worth over $1 billion within 5 years. More optimistic projections indicated the research could lead to treatments worth tens of billions in annual revenue. The irony was crushing. Marcus had built his pharmaceutical empire by developing treatments for diseases he would never personally face. Now he was dying from cancer, while his adopted children carried the potential cure in their blood. The money meant nothing to him anymore, but the possibility of saving others like himself felt like both an opportunity and a burden. A soft knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. Maria stood in the doorway, still in her school uniform, but with her backpack slung over her shoulder, clearly having just returned from her after-school tutoring session. "Daddy Marcus, can I talk to you?" she asked, with the serious expression she wore when something was weighing on her mind. Marcus quickly minimized the financial documents on his computer screen and gestured for her to come in. Maria was the most perceptive of the 5 children, and he had been expecting her to notice the subtle changes in his behavior since receiving the blood test results. She settled into the chair across from his desk, her posture formal in the way she adopted when discussing important matters. "Is everything okay with our blood tests? I know you said we're all healthy, but you've been acting different since Diego got sick. And Elena said you've been making a lot of phone calls to doctors." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. Maria's intelligence and observational skills, which he usually admired, now posed a direct threat to his ability to keep the children's genetic secret. He needed to be truthful enough to satisfy her concerns without revealing information that could change their lives forever. "The blood tests showed that all of you are very healthy," he said carefully. "Healthier than most children, actually. But you're right that I've been preoccupied lately. I've been dealing with some business decisions that are more complicated than usual." Maria studied his face with the intensity of someone who had learned to read adult expressions for signs of danger or deception. "Are we going to have to move again? Because if there are money problems, we don't need all the expensive things. We just need to stay together." The concern in her voice broke something inside Marcus. These children had been moved from home to home, separated and reunited, never knowing if their current situation would last. Now they had finally found stability and love, and Maria was already preparing for it to be taken away again. "We're not moving," Marcus said firmly, crossing the room to kneel beside her chair. "And there are no money problems. You 5 are my family now, and families stick together no matter what challenges they face." Maria's shoulders relaxed slightly, but her eyes remained watchful. "Mum and Dad used to say that families stick together too, but then they died, and we got separated. Anyway, sometimes things happen that adults can't control." Her words hit Marcus with devastating accuracy. She was right that sometimes circumstances beyond anyone's control could tear families apart. His own terminal diagnosis was exactly that kind of uncontrollable circumstance, and he had spent months agonizing over how to ensure his children's future when he was no longer there to protect them. "You're absolutely right," he admitted. "Sometimes terrible things happen that nobody can prevent, but I'm working very hard to make sure that you 5 will always be taken care of, no matter what happens to me." Maria tilted her head, picking up on the implication in his words. "What do you mean, no matter what happens to you? Are you sick?" The direct question caught Marcus off guard. He had been so focused on hiding the children's medical secret that he hadn't adequately prepared for questions about his own health. The chemotherapy had been taking its toll, making him more tired and causing him to lose weight, despite his efforts to eat normally around the children. "I'm fine," he said, the lie feeling heavy on his tongue. "I just meant that it's important for adults to plan for the future, to make sure children are protected even if something unexpected happens." Maria didn't look entirely convinced, but she nodded acceptance of his explanation. Diego was worried that his blood test meant he was really sick. He's been having nightmares about going to the hospital like Mom did before she died. Marcus felt his chest tighten with both guilt and determination. Diego's fears about being sick were tragically ironic, given that his blood might hold the key to preventing countless others from experiencing what their biological parents had gone through. But the 6-year-old's nightmares also reinforced Marcus's protective instincts. These children had already endured too much medical trauma for their young lives. "Diego is perfectly healthy," Marcus assured her. "Would it help if I talked to him about the test results? Sometimes children worry more when they don't understand what's happening." Maria nodded gratefully. "He looks up to you so much. If you tell him he's okay, he'll believe it." That night, Marcus found Diego in his bedroom, playing quietly with the Lego set that had become his favorite possession. The 6-year-old looked up when Marcus entered, his face brightening with the unguarded affection that never failed to move his adoptive father. "Hey, buddy," Marcus said, settling onto the floor beside the elaborate castle Diego was constructing. "Maria mentioned you've been worried about your blood test. Want to talk about it?" Diego's small hands stilled on the plastic bricks. "The doctor took a lot of blood. More than when I got hurt and needed stitches. I thought maybe I was really sick and nobody wanted to tell me." Marcus felt the weight of the child's trust and fear in equal measure. Diego had every reason to be concerned about medical tests, given his family history, but his blood actually contained the most extraordinary health indicators Dr. Kim had ever seen. "Dr. Kim took extra blood because she wanted to make sure you were super healthy," Marcus explained, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes doctors need more blood to run lots of different tests all at once. It's like when you want to check all the parts of your Lego castle to make sure everything is strong and working right." Diego considered this analogy seriously. "So, I'm not sick like Mom and Dad were." "You're not sick at all," Marcus said with complete honesty. "In fact, you're one of the healthiest kids Dr. Kim has ever seen. All 5 of you are incredibly strong and healthy." The relief that washed over Diego's face was immediate and heartwarming. He threw his arms around Marcus's neck in a spontaneous hug that conveyed more gratitude than words could express. "I love you, Daddy Marcus," Diego whispered against his shoulder. "I was scared you might send me back if I was sick." The simple statement shattered whatever remained of Marcus's composure. The idea that this perfect child might think his worth depended on his health, that love could be conditional on medical test results, was unbearable. In that moment, Marcus knew with absolute certainty that he would never allow his children to become research subjects, regardless of the potential benefits to medical science. "I could never send you back," Marcus whispered, holding Diego tightly. "You're my son now, forever, no matter what. Being sick or healthy doesn't change how much I love you." As he tucked Diego into bed and read him a story about brave knights and magical kingdoms, Marcus felt a clarity that had eluded him for days. His children's genetic gift might represent the greatest medical discovery of the century, but they were children first, medical miracles second. Their happiness, security, and normal childhood were worth more than any potential cure their blood might provide. The next morning, Marcus called Dr. Kim and arranged a private meeting for that afternoon. When he arrived at her office, she was clearly excited about discussing the research possibilities that had been keeping her awake at night. "I've been researching similar genetic variations," she began immediately, pulling out a stack of medical journals. "There are only 3 documented cases of anything approaching what your children have, and none of them were as pronounced or as comprehensive. Marcus, this could change everything we know about cancer prevention and treatment." Marcus held up a hand to stop her enthusiastic explanation. "Dr. Kim, I've made a decision about how to proceed with the children's test results." She looked at him expectantly, clearly hoping he had chosen to pursue the research applications. "I want all copies of their blood work destroyed," Marcus said quietly. "I want their genetic profiles deleted from your computer systems, and I want your word that you'll never mention these results to anyone." Dr. Kim's face fell with disappointment and confusion. "Marcus, I understand your desire to protect your children, but you're talking about suppressing a discovery that could save millions of lives. How can you make that choice for everyone who might benefit from this research?" "Because I'm not making the choice for everyone," Marcus replied firmly. "I'm making the choice for my 5 children who have already been through more trauma and upheaval than any kids should experience. They deserve to have normal childhoods, not to spend their lives as research subjects." "But the potential applications are theoretical," Marcus interrupted. "Dr. Kim, you're talking about years or decades of research that might lead to treatments that might save lives. What's not theoretical is the certain impact on my children's lives if this information becomes public. They would become the most valuable research subjects in medical history, and their privacy, their freedom, their childhood would be sacrificed for possibilities." Dr. Kim was quiet for several minutes, clearly struggling with the ethical implications of Marcus's request. "What about your obligation to society, to future cancer patients who might be saved?" "My first obligation is to my children," Marcus said without hesitation. "I adopted them to give them love and stability, not to turn them into medical commodities. If this genetic trait is truly hereditary, then my grandchildren or great-grandchildren might face this decision again. But that's their choice to make, not mine." "And what about your own cancer?" Dr. Kim asked gently. "Your children's blood might hold the key to saving your life." The question hung in the air between them, and Marcus felt the full weight of what he was choosing to sacrifice. His own death sentence might be commutable if he allowed his children to become research subjects. He could potentially live to see them graduate from high school, attend college, get married, have children of their own. All he had to do was agree to let medical science study their blood. "My cancer has already progressed too far," Marcus said finally. "Even if research began immediately, it would take years to develop any treatment, and I don't have years. But more importantly, I didn't adopt these children to save my own life. I adopted them to give them the best life possible, and that means protecting them from becoming research subjects." Dr. Kim studied his face, seeing the determination that had built a pharmaceutical empire now focused on protecting 5 children from the very industry that had made him wealthy. "I'll need everything in writing," she said reluctantly. "Legal documentation that you're refusing further testing or research participation on behalf of your minor children. This goes against every instinct I have as a doctor, but I understand your position as a father." Marcus nodded, already having anticipated this requirement. "My attorney is preparing the necessary documents. But Dr. Kim, I need your personal word that this conversation and these test results will remain confidential." "You have it," she said quietly. "Though I hope someday you'll reconsider, or that your children will choose differently when they're old enough to make their own decisions." As Marcus left Dr. Kim's office for what he knew would be the last time, he felt a mixture of relief and regret that would stay with him for the remainder of his life. He had chosen to protect his children's innocence at the cost of potentially revolutionary medical discoveries. History might eventually judge him as selfish, but his children would grow up free from the burden of carrying miracles in their blood. That evening, the Rodriguez siblings gathered around the dinner table as they had every night since moving into Marcus's home. Elena had prepared Diego's favorite chicken enchiladas, and the conversation flowed with the easy rhythm of a family that had found its groove. Carlos and Carmen debated the physics of soccer balls, while Sophia described the butterfly garden she was painting in art class. Maria helped Diego with his reading homework, and everyone laughed when he dramatically acted out the story of a talking frog. Marcus watched them with the intensity of someone memorizing moments that would need to last a lifetime. In 6 months, maybe less, these children would be orphans again, but they would face that loss as a family, united and protected by his decision to keep their genetic secret. The money he had earned and the treatments he had developed meant nothing compared to the sound of their laughter around his dinner table. As the evening wound down and the children dispersed to their homework and bedtime routines, Marcus remained at the table, thinking about the choice he had made. Somewhere in the world, people were dying from the same cancer that was killing him. Their families were experiencing the same desperate hope for medical breakthroughs that might save their loved ones. His decision to protect his children's privacy meant those breakthroughs might never come, or might come too late for countless patients. But as Diego ran back into the kitchen to give him one more goodnight hug, and as Maria peeked around the corner to remind him about her school play next week, Marcus knew he had made the only choice he could live with in whatever time he had left. His children were not medical miracles or research opportunities. They were simply 5 extraordinary kids who deserved to grow up loved and protected, carrying nothing more precious in their blood than the genetic inheritance of 2 parents who had loved them first. 3 months had passed since Marcus made his decision to protect his children's genetic secret, and the weight of that choice had begun to manifest in ways he hadn't anticipated. The chemotherapy treatments were becoming less effective, and Dr. Sarah Chen had gently suggested that Marcus begin considering hospice care within the next few weeks. The irony of dying from a disease his children could potentially cure had evolved from painful to almost absurd, but Marcus found peace in knowing he had chosen love over science. The children had settled into their new life with remarkable resilience, though Marcus noticed subtle changes in their behavior that suggested they sensed something was shifting in their family dynamic. Maria had become even more protective of her younger siblings, often taking on responsibilities that should have been Marcus's. The twins had grown closer to each other, speaking in the private language that only siblings understand when adults aren't listening. Sophia had started leaving small drawings on Marcus's desk each morning, colorful pictures of their family holding hands under rainbow skies. Diego had developed a habit of checking on Marcus throughout the day, appearing at his office door with innocent questions that were really requests for reassurance that everything was normal. Elena Rodriguez had also noticed the changes, though. Marcus had been careful not to reveal the full extent of his declining health. She had been with the family long enough to recognize the signs of someone preparing for departure, the way Marcus had begun documenting everything from the children's medical information to their favorite bedtime stories. When she found him, one morning, updating the emergency contact lists for all 5 schools, adding multiple backup guardians and detailed instructions for each child's specific needs, she finally confronted him directly. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk with the determined expression of someone who would not be dismissed. "The children are asking questions I don't know how to answer. They want to know why you're taking so many doctor's appointments, why you're always on the phone with lawyers, and why you've been hugging them longer at bedtime." Marcus looked up from the legal documents he had been reviewing, seeing the concern and affection in Elena's eyes. She had become far more than a nanny to the children. She was their anchor of stability, the one constant in their lives who would remain after he was gone. If anyone deserved to know the truth about his condition, it was Elena. "I haven't been entirely honest about my health," Marcus admitted, his voice carrying the fatigue that had become his constant companion. "I have. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors have given me maybe 6 weeks, possibly less." Elena's face went through a series of emotions: shock, grief, anger, and finally a fierce protectiveness that reminded Marcus why he had chosen her to care for his children. "How long have you known?" I was diagnosed the day before I started. The adoption process, Marcus replied. Everything I have done since then has been about ensuring these children have the security and love they deserve after I'm gone. Do they know? Not yet. I've been trying to find the right way to tell them the right time. They've already lost their biological parents. I don't want their memories of our time together to be overshadowed by anticipating my death. Elena was quiet for several minutes, processing the implications of Marcus's revelation. What arrangements have you made for their care? Marcus opened a thick folder that contained months of legal planning. I've established a comprehensive trust fund that will provide for their education, housing, and any needs they might have through adulthood. You've been named as their primary guardian, if you're willing to accept that responsibility. Charlotte. Wilson, their former social worker who helped with the adoption, has agreed to serve as their advocate and ensure the transition goes smoothly. Of course I'll take care of them, Eleanor said without hesitation. But Marcus, they need to know. Children can sense when adults are keeping secrets, especially secrets this big. Maria already suspects something is wrong. Marcus nodded, having come to the same conclusion himself. I know. I've been waiting for the right moment, but I'm beginning to realize there is no right moment to tell children their father is dying. Daze. That evening, Marcus asked Elena to take Diego to his soccer practice while he spoke with the 4 older children. They gathered in the living room where they held their family meetings, settling onto the comfortable couches with the casual familiarity of children who felt completely at home. Marcus looked at each of their faces. Maria's intelligent eyes that missed nothing, the twins' identical expressions of curiosity, Sophia's artistic soul that felt everything deeply, and wondered how he had been blessed with such extraordinary children in the final months of his life. I need to talk to you about something important, Marcus began, his carefully rehearsed words suddenly feeling inadequate. Something I should have told you sooner, but I wanted to make sure you felt secure in our family first. Maria straightened in her chair, her protective instincts immediately engaged. Is this about why you've been going to so many doctor's appointments? Marcus nodded, appreciating her directness even as it made the conversation more difficult. Yes, I've been seeing doctors because I'm sick. I have cancer, and the treatments aren't working as well as we hoped they would. The silence that followed felt heavy with unspoken fears. Carlos and Carmen exchanged glances, their twin connection allowing them to communicate without words. Sophia's eyes filled with tears that she tried to blink away. Maria's face went through a series of expressions before settling into the determined look she wore when facing difficult challenges. Are you going to die? Sophia asked in a whisper, voicing the question that hung in the air between them. Marcus felt his throat tighten, but he forced himself to answer honestly. Yes, sweetheart. The doctors think I have maybe a month or 2 left. Carmen, who approached everything analytically, asked the practical question that Marcus had been dreading. What happens to us? Do we have to go back to foster care? No, Marcus said firmly, moving to kneel in front of their couch, so he could look directly into their eyes. You're not going anywhere. Eleanor is going to be your guardian, and you'll stay here in your home. I've made sure you'll have everything you need for college, for your futures, for whatever dreams you want to pursue. But we'll be orphans again, Carlos said quietly, his voice breaking slightly on the words. Marcus felt the weight of their loss, not just the anticipated loss of him, but the reminder of the parents they had already buried. These children had experienced more grief than most adults, and now he was asking them to face it again. You'll always be a family, Marcus said, reaching out to take their hands. Death can't change that. Your parents who died loved you enough to give you life and each other, I love you enough to make sure you have everything you need to grow up together and take care of each other. That love doesn't disappear when someone dies." Maria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to maintain her composure as the family's protector. "How long do we have with you?" "I don't know exactly," Marcus admitted. "Maybe 6 weeks, maybe a little more. But however long it is, I want us to spend it being a family, making good memories, and talking about anything you want to know or understand." Sophia climbed off the couch and wrapped her arms around Marcus's neck, her small body shaking with tears. "I don't want you to die, Daddy Marcus. We just found you." Marcus held her tightly, feeling his own tears finally spilling over. "I don't want to leave you either, sweetheart. But I'm so grateful I got to be your dad, even for a little while. You've made my life more wonderful than I ever imagined it could be. Mine." When Diego returned from soccer practice an hour later, his siblings had gathered around Marcus on the couch, and he immediately sensed the emotional atmosphere of the room. Elena took him aside and gently explained the situation in terms his 6-year-old mind could understand. Diego's reaction was swift and heartbreaking. He climbed onto Marcus's lap and announced that he would share his healthy blood with his daddy so he wouldn't have to die. The innocent offer broke Marcus's heart, while simultaneously reinforcing his decision to protect their genetic secret. Diego's willingness to give his blood to save his adoptive father was exactly the kind of situation Marcus had wanted to avoid. Children feeling responsible for medical miracles they carried unknowingly. "That's the most generous offer anyone has ever made me," Marcus told Diego seriously. "But sometimes even the best medicine can't fix everything. What I need from you is to be the amazing little boy you are and to help take care of your sisters and brother." Over the following weeks, the family dynamic shifted in ways that were both heartbreaking and beautiful. The children began creating memory projects. Sophia painted portraits of their family adventures. Carmen programmed a digital scrapbook with photos and videos from their months together. Carlos wrote stories about their soccer games and family dinners. Maria composed letters to Marcus, expressing everything she wanted him to know about how much he meant to them. And Diego built elaborate Lego monuments to their family. Marcus found strength he didn't know he possessed, making it to every school event and activity that mattered to his children. He attended Sophia's art show, where her painting of their family at the beach won first place. He cheered at Carlos's championship soccer game, his voice hoarse from shouting encouragement from the sidelines. He helped Carmen prepare for a coding competition that she won with a program designed to help other foster children find resources. He sat through Maria's school play about family bonds, tears streaming down his face as she delivered a monologue about the different ways people become family. Elena proved herself to be exactly the guardian Marcus had hoped she would become. She facilitated conversations between Marcus and the children, helped them process their grief while celebrating their remaining time together, and gradually took on more responsibility as Marcus's energy declined. The children began turning to her naturally for daily decisions, while still seeking Marcus for emotional support and important discussions. 3 weeks after Marcus had told the children about his diagnosis, Dr. Chen suggested it was time to consider transitioning to home hospice care. Marcus's pain was becoming difficult to manage with outpatient treatments, and his mobility was decreasing significantly. The conversation with the children about this next phase was somehow easier than the initial revelation had been, perhaps because they had already begun the process of accepting their father's mortality. Hospice means making sure Daddy Marcus is comfortable and not in pain, Elena explained to the younger children. It means doctors and nurses will come here to help him so he doesn't have to leave home for treatments anymore. Maria, ever practical, asked about school schedules. and whether their routines would need to change. Marcus assured her that their lives should continue as normally as possible. Homework, soccer practice, ballet lessons, art projects, and friend visits. He wanted their world to remain stable even as his became smaller. The hospice team that arrived the following Monday was led by Dr. Patricia Wong, a palliative care specialist who had worked with families for over 20 years. She assessed Marcus's condition with gentle efficiency while also evaluating the family's emotional needs. After speaking with each of the children individually, she recommended a grief counselor who specialized in helping children process anticipatory loss. "Your children are remarkable," Dr. Wong told Marcus after her initial evaluation. "They're scared and sad, which is natural, but they're also incredibly resilient. The stability and love you've given them in these months has created a foundation that will serve them well." Marcus felt a deep satisfaction in her assessment. Despite the brevity of their time together, he had managed to give his children the security and unconditional love they had been missing since their biological parents' death. Whatever challenges they faced in the future, they would face them as a united family, with the knowledge that they were worthy of love. As October arrived with its brilliant autumn colors, Marcus's condition deteriorated more rapidly than anyone had anticipated. He was confined to a hospital bed that had been set up in the living room, where he could remain part of the family's daily activities while receiving the care he needed. The children had adapted to this new arrangement with the flexibility that had helped them survive previous transitions, doing homework nearby while he rested and including him in dinner conversations, even when he was too tired to eat. Elena had become the seamless bridge between Marcus's parental role and her own emerging authority as the children's primary caregiver. She consulted with him on important decisions while taking initiative on daily management, ensuring the children felt secure in the transition of leadership within their family structure. On a particularly beautiful afternoon in mid-October, Marcus asked Elena to help him sit outside on the terrace where he could watch the children play in the yard. Diego was teaching Sofia how to kick a soccer ball while Carlos and Carmen worked together on a science project that involved launching small rockets they had built. Maria sat nearby, reading but keeping one eye on her siblings with the protective vigilance that had become second nature to her. "They're going to be okay," Marcus said to Eleanor, his voice weak but certain. "You've become such an important part of their lives, and they trust you completely." Eleanor wiped away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "They love you so much, Marcus. You've given them something precious in these months, the knowledge that they're worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for. That's going to carry them through whatever comes next." That evening, the children gathered around Marcus's bed for what had become their nightly tradition of sharing the best part of their day. Diego reported that he had made 3 successful soccer kicks without falling down. Sofia had finished her butterfly painting and wanted to hang it in Marcus's room. Carlos and Carmen had successfully launched their rocket 15 feet in the air. Maria had received an A on her biology test and had been selected for the advanced placement program. "I'm so proud of all of you," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper, but filled with genuine pride. "You're going to do amazing things with your lives, and I want you to know that every success you have, every goal you reach, every moment of happiness you experience, I'll be proud of you." 2 days later, Marcus passed away peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by his 5 children and Elena. Dr. Wong had prepared them for this moment, explaining what to expect and helping them understand that death could be gentle when someone was ready to go. The children said their goodbyes in their own ways. Maria held his hand and promised to take care of everyone. The twins told him about their plans for high school. Sofia placed her finished butterfly painting where he could see it, and Diego whispered that he would always remember their bedtime stories. The funeral arrangements reflected Marcus's desire to celebrate the family they had created, rather than mourn what had been lost. The service was held at the small chapel near their home, attended by the school friends who had become important. To the children, Elena's extended family, who had embraced the Rodriguez siblings, and a few of Marcus's longtime business associates who understood the profound change that had occurred in his final months. Elena read a letter Marcus had written, to be shared at his service, words that captured his gratitude for the unexpected gift of fatherhood and his confidence in his children's futures. The children each contributed something to the ceremony: Sophia's artwork, Carlos's poem about family, Carmen's digital presentation of their memories together, Maria's speech about the different ways people become family, and Diego's simple statement that Marcus was the best daddy anyone could ask for. In the weeks following the funeral, the family established new routines that honored Marcus's memory while allowing them to move forward. Elena officially became their guardian, and the children remained in the Malibu home that had become their sanctuary. The trust Marcus had established provided not only financial security, but also funding for a family counselor who helped them process their grief and adjust to their new circumstances. Maria threw herself into her studies with even greater determination, motivated by Marcus's belief in her potential to become a doctor. She often spoke about wanting to help other children who had experienced loss, perhaps by working in pediatric oncology or family medicine. Carlos and Carmen continued their soccer and programming pursuits, but they also developed an interest in philanthropy, talking about using their future success to help other foster children. Sophia's artwork began incorporating themes of family and memory, creating beautiful pieces that captured the love she had experienced in her short time with Marcus. Her paintings were displayed throughout their home, constant reminders of the joy that had defined their family even in the face of loss. Diego, too young to fully understand the permanence of death, continued to talk about Marcus in the present tense, sharing his daily adventures with his daddy, who lived in the sky now. Elena proved to be everything Marcus had hoped she would. Become a loving guardian who honored his memory while establishing her own relationship with each child. She maintained their family traditions while creating new ones, ensuring that their grief was balanced with hope, and their memories of loss were tempered with experiences of continued love. 6 months after Marcus's death, Dr. Kim called Elena to follow up on the children's health and to inquire about scheduling routine checkups. Elena was surprised to learn that their medical records contained no information about the blood tests that had been performed the previous year, and when she asked the children about it, they remembered giving blood but had no knowledge of any unusual results. Dr. Kim said all our tests were normal, Maria reported when Elena asked about their medical history. Daddy Marcus told us we were all very healthy. Elena didn't pursue the matter further, trusting that Marcus had made whatever medical decisions were appropriate for his children. She scheduled routine pediatric checkups with a different practice, one closer to their home and more convenient. For their family's needs, the children's medical records showed them to be remarkably healthy, with no unusual notations or recommendations for special monitoring. As the first anniversary of Marcus's adoption of the Rodriguez siblings approached, Elena helped them plan a celebration of the family they had created together. They visited his gravesite with flowers and letters, sharing updates about their accomplishments and their continued bond as siblings. They prepared his favorite meal and told stories about their memories together, laughing at Diego's dramatic reenactments of bedtime stories and Carlos's impressions of Marcus cheering at soccer games. "Do you think he knows how we're doing?" Sophia asked as they sat around the dinner table that evening, the empty chair at the head serving as a reminder of their father's presence in their lives. "I think he knows," Eleanor replied, looking around at the 5 remarkable children who had been transformed by love in the final months of a dying man's life. I think he can see that you're still a family, that you're taking care of each other, and that you're growing into exactly the kind of people he believed you could become. The Rodriguez siblings had found their forever family in the most unexpected circumstances, with a man who chose love over his own potential salvation, who protected their innocence over revolutionary medical discoveries, and who gave them the greatest gift possible, the knowledge that they were worthy of unconditional love. Their blood might contain miracles that could save countless lives, but the miracle Marcus had given them was simpler and more profound: the security of belonging to someone who would sacrifice everything to ensure their happiness. Years later, when they were adults with families of their own, they would still gather for holidays in the Malibu home where they had learned what family truly meant. And somewhere in their blood, carried forward to future generations, lay the potential for medical breakthroughs that might someday help other children avoid the kind of loss they had experienced. But that choice would be theirs to make, armed with the wisdom and strength their adoptive father had given them during the most important 6 months of all their lives. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.